Welcome to the Limitless Leaders podcast series brought to you by ASPS, the Aesthetic Society, and the American Hernia Society with the generous support of Allergan Aesthetics. My name is Dr. Ashley Amalfi, and I'm a board-certified plastic surgeon at the Quatella Center for Plastic Surgery in Rochester, New York, and I'm the chair of the ASPS Women Plastic Surgeons Forum and the Limitless Leaders Steering Committee member. Please join us for the Limitless Leaders podcast, where we dive into the stories of extraordinary women making a significant impact in our field, as well as the men who are supporting them to get there. We are breaking gender barriers and inspiring the next generation of leaders.
Good evening. You're listening to the Limitless Leaders podcast series brought to you by the American Society of Plastic Surgery, the Aesthetic Society, and the American Hernia Society with the generous support of Allergan Aesthetics. I'm Dr. Noopur Gangopadhyay, today's special guest host of Limitless Leaders, and today we're talking about thriving, not surviving in academic medicine. I'm a plastic surgeon at the Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago and Northwestern, where I've been here for a little over 7 years. And on today's episode, I'm really pleased with the three strong, talented, intelligent women that are going to be talking this evening. First up, we have Dr. Julia Corcoran, who grew up in Maryland and then attended the University of Virginia, followed by medical school at the University of Missouri-Columbia. And then she did a general surgery residency at Southern Illinois University, a plastic surgery residency at the University of Cincinnati, and then her fellowship in cleft and craniofacial surgery with Dr. Ken Salyer at Dallas. Dr. Corcoran has been a strong proponent of Midwestern plastic surgery. She started her career at the University of Cincinnati, both at Cincinnati Children's and the Shrine, and then was at Northwestern University and Children's Memorial, which then evolved into Lurie Children's Hospital between 2000 and 2019. And she's currently faculty at the University of Illinois Health System, as well as the Shriners Hospital here in Chicago. And she serves as the program director for the residency. Next up on our list is Dr. Amanda Gosman. Amanda is a specialist in cleft and craniofacial surgery, as well as adult craniofacial surgery. She also does facial reanimation, gender affirming surgery, and some aesthetic surgery. A lot of you are familiar with Dr. Gosman's work through the SHARE program, as well as her international contributions. She's currently the director of the craniofacial and pediatric plastic surgery program at UC San Diego Health and Rady Children's Hospital. She's also the director of the Fresh Start Clinic for craniofacial anomalies at Rady Children's Hospital. And she is the professor in chief of the Division of Plastic Surgery, where she also works with their residency program and the craniofacial fellowship. A lot of her research is also focused on plastic surgery outcomes, quality of life, and international health, as well as improving health disparities, both amongst providers as well as amongst her patients. So thank you so much, Dr. Gosman. And last but not least, Dr. Amber Leis is our last panelist tonight, and she is the residency program director and the division chief for plastic hand surgery at the University of California, Irvine. She's also founded of the brachial plexus birth injury program at Chalk Children's Hospital. She's a hand and microsurgeon with a special interest in pediatric hand. She is from a little town in Sisters, Oregon. And then she graduated at OSU's Honors College with an honors in microbiology. She received her medical degree at Johns Hopkins and then went on to do an integrated plastic surgery residency at Loma Linda, followed by a hand fellowship at the Department of Orthopedics at the University of Southern California before starting at UCI. She's also incredibly passionate about education and mentorship, as well as giving access to students of all backgrounds in her specialty. So first of all, thank you all very much to all three of you for joining us. This will be a lot of fun for me because I count all of you amongst my friends and colleagues, as well as mentorship, which I have requested from all of you on several times. And so I'm really interested to hear your take on how you all are thriving and not just surviving in academic medicine. So I think I'll just start by going down the list and asking each of you to describe a couple of your leadership roles. So I'll start with Julia.
Well, my current leadership role you've already discussed, and that's being a residency program director. And what's particularly fun and challenging about my position at this point in time is that I am converting a independent residency into a integrated residency, which is essentially starting a residency from the ground up. And that's been kind of a fun challenge, and it keeps me on my toes. Um, I have done most of my prior leadership roles in medical education and plastic surgery, really, quite frankly, with undergraduate medical education. And that was my entree into finding a little niche in academic medicine that made me happy and not just average.
Thanks, Julia. Amanda, what about you?
Yes, thanks, Noopur. Thanks for having us. In terms of leadership roles, I have served as a residency program director, and like Julia, I think that was one of the most challenging, but also most rewarding jobs I have served since 2009, and then briefly kind of passed that off, but did have the opportunity to take an independent program and transition into an integrated residency program. And I think one of the things that many of us are attracted to in academia is really just being a part of that journey and inspiring young people to come into a specialty that we really love. I think because of that role, I have pursued or been brought into other leadership roles, not really out of any desire for a leadership role, but just to be effective as a mentor of the next generation. And that includes both as a division chief and running our clinical and academic program, but also getting engaged nationally through ACAPs or ACAPs and our national and regional societies, because I think we are a really small community. And when I started out here in San Diego, I really didn't have a lot of mentorship or sponsorship within academia. And that was really hard to overcome in terms of being able to advocate for the trainees and their future. So I realized that kind of getting engaged in that sense was really required in order to help them along their journey.
I think that's really a great point about what keeps us engaged and what keeps us going. Amber, what about you? Can you describe a little bit about your leadership role, either through the residency program or your kind of more clinical focus?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having us, Noopur. It's such an honor to be here with all these incredible panelists. Uh, I, like the other panelists, I am a residency program director, or unlike Amanda, who's moved on from that role, but I am still very much involved in the resident education at our institution. There are a lot of aspects of leadership involved in this, which range from very mundane tasks, just kind of managing the day to day of a residency, to larger scale aspects of leadership, like trying to expand a residency program or build new sites or adjust to new hospital build outs and things like this. I had some additional leadership kind of thrust upon me when I started at UCI, because I was the first hand surgeon that had ever been hired in that department. And I think that gave me an opportunity to build a division. We now have a division of hand surgery, and I'm the division chief. We have several junior partners working in that division. But through connections in orthopedics, I was able to serve as an interim hand fellowship director, and have really tried to leverage both the relationships with orthopedics and the growth in our own department into building out a larger center for hand surgery and peripheral nerve surgery excellence at UCI. And I really appreciate what Amanda mentioned about leadership in societies as well. Although I don't occupy positions of leadership the way that she does, I've tried to be really involved in committees in a number of different societies, including ACAPS and ASPS and the hand surgery societies, as a way of continuing to grow as a leader, but also to be able to have some say over what happens in our specialty and what happens for our trainees.
I think that's really important, Amber, that, the service does help pave the way forward, not just for it to be better for our generation, but for the legacy that you all are leaving for residents and medical students and high school students that are coming after us. I think one of the things that is often seen for women in medicine and women in surgery is at a certain point, whether you want to call it burnout or sort of disengagement, there seems to be this cut point where you decide to leave academic medicine. So all three of you have been in academic medicine your entire career and have continued to achieve at high levels. So what would you say are some of the things that keep you engaged in academic medicine? I'm going to start with Amanda.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, to be totally transparent, I think I definitely, consider other career pathways all the time. I mean, I think that when we look at academic plastic surgery and really at the numbers, we are a tiny minority of, maybe 15%. And it's really hard to reconcile that when you're working in a constrained institutional environment. You don't have a lot of control over your staff. You're making a lot less money, and there are also incredible advantages. But I think that it's normal to always grapple with that, and I wouldn't want anyone to think that like every day I wake up and it was like, yay, I'm academic plastic surgeon. But I would say that the things that ultimately, even on those days when you're thinking, well, wouldn't it be easier to kind of go into private practice or do something else or be employed? It's the kind of the passion that led me into this field in the first place that I'm not able to do in other venues. So for me, that like always started with global health, and my like dream has always been to really kind of engage in that sphere in an educational capacity building manner. So when I spent time living overseas and kind of came back to the US, I really realized that the only way to do that in an ethical and sustainable way was really to leverage the resources, incredible resources that we have through our academic institutions, and that through the education not only of our own future plastic surgeons, but of those around the globe, is going to really make a difference in terms of health equity and disparity. So that's my passion. And, also for those of us who do types of surgery that are not really feasible to do in private practice very easily. I'm a pediatric craniofacial surgeon like Julia and you, and it's just not something that is like really amenable to, being isolated. We need a team to have great outcomes. We don't understand a lot of why we're doing certain things, and looking at it from a research perspective is really important to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our patients. So I think for those two reasons, the education, the global surgery approach, and then, just having a practice type that I'm most passionate about is really that only kind of lives in academia for me. So I don't really see myself transitioning out.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us on this call would echo that those sentiments, and I think that resonates with a lot of our residents and fellows that have chosen to stay in academics. Julia, what about you? I know you alluded it to a little bit earlier with your experience with undergrad medical education, and you and I have had several personal discussions on the benefits of getting involved at the medical school. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing now and what you did earlier in your career that has allowed you to have such a long career in academic plastic surgery.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm going to harken back a little bit to what Amanda was saying, which is to say that, it's not like I wouldn't explore other things, but I have a pretty arcane small part of plastic surgery that I practice, and it really belongs in an academic setting, especially since pediatric stuff is really surgery in 4 dimensions, and you need to follow it out for a long period of time. And the structure of a team in an academic environment leaves my patients to the next group who are going to come behind me to make sure that it's followed and recorded. I think something else is, and this is a personal thing, is I would hate to run a business. I have zero interest. My father was a naval physician for the first 26 years of my life, and then he went into private practice, and I watched him establish a private practice, and I watched him work and do all of that stuff. And so I saw him in a period when he was in like the naval practice, which was group and academic practice with residents and fellows, and then I saw him in his private practice. And I actually really kind of found private practice to be kind of a miserable life compared to the life I recalled growing up with. And so I've always had that in my mind that I've never ever wanted to be a private practitioner. To address your question about, the roles in undergraduate medical education, I think there's something really special about medical schools. They produce doctors, MDs, from students, and it's that magical moment where you can take somebody from, just the generic college grad, and you give them something that's going to change their life. And the magic that they see and remind us of, the first time they see something that I've done 25 times and they're fascinated by, and I'm like, we've done this 25 times this day, but they see it and it's the first time they see it and they see it from different eyes. And it reminds me of the magic and the miracle and like really the privilege of doing what we do every day. And so those things, there are sort of emotional aspects to it. I'd hate to be a private practitioner, and I love to see joy and wonder.
I absolutely love that. And that certainly resonates with my experience with the medical students. To your point, Julia, um, there is something magical about, for example, doing a cleft lip repair and a medical student seeing it for the first time. And I remember my cohort of medical students, two of them were like, "You've saved a life today." And while that's not necessarily true, I think a lot of what we do in plastic surgery is changing the quality of life and hopefully improving it. And it was just really refreshing to see that again from the medical student perspective, where it's exciting and it feels like so impactful. And so it's nice to be reminded of that wonderment and maybe the joy that comes with experiencing things again. Amber, what about you? What do you think has allowed you to stay engaged in academic medicine? Because for both of us, right, we're at what we are now considered mid-career, which is a funny thing for us to say. But this is a lot of the time where we sort of see that attrition from academic medicine for women.
Absolutely. And just for the audience, I'm about to enter my 9th year of practice, just like crossed over that threshold. So it's, just starting my 9th year. And I just love the answers that both Amanda and Julia have given so far. And I would just really echo what Julia had said, that I think all of us that went into plastic surgery have that origin story, that moment of like when we discovered plastic surgery and when we knew we wanted to do that for a career. And working with medical students allows you to experience that a little bit almost every month, if not every week, because you get to see that kind of excitement for them. And I really love still being connected to that. I think in addition to the things that both Julia and Amanda have mentioned, one of the other things that I really love about being in academics is continuing to be challenged. I still get to grow a skill set. And whether that means that really challenging cases are coming in or students are coming in and asking me hard questions that I don't know the answer to and should know the answer to, or just going to meetings and having that protected time and that being kind of an expected part of my role to continue to keep learning and being exposed to new techniques and new ideas, I think is something I really love about being in academics.
Thanks so much, Amber. I want to pivot a little bit because I think all three of you are great examples of seeking additional training and skill sets, whether that's through your national organizations or getting another degree, and how that's really allowed you to continue to push the field forward in academics. So, just kind of quite frankly, have you pursued any additional training or courses, or have you gotten an additional degree on top of your medical degree while you've been building your career? So I'll start with Amber and then work my way up.
So I haven't gotten any additional degrees. I did go through a women's leadership academy, which was kind of like a serial sequence of workshops with women at UCI in different specialties, where we talked about different leadership strategies, kind of identified our strengths, and just kind of focused on a number of different aspects of leadership. I found that to be really helpful. It definitely got me inspired to maybe consider doing something on a larger scale, like pursuing one of these Harvard courses in the future, but I have not yet done that. And then It did do a something called Candor Peer Supporter training. I've gone through that twice now, which just means that I serve as a peer supporter for when my faculty or any of the faculty at UCI are struggling in some way, whether that is, through a complicated case or a lawsuit or some type of professional lapse, that I am one of the people that's available to sit down and talk with them and try and help them through that. And I think the process of going through that training was really helpful for me. You had mentioned before that burnout is something that we all kind of talk about, and how do we stave that off, but having an awareness of how burnout affects other people and having some strategies to help other people also, I think, has been helpful for me to insulate myself to some degree against some of those things.
Thanks, Amber. Amanda, what about you?
I have not gone to any formal, pursued any other formal degrees. I also have engaged in some leadership training, both at my institution. There was one that was for like my early career. I also did one that was really helpful from our health system standpoint. And um, I think there's probably some variability in some of these courses, but I think it was really helpful to do those types of courses both within my institution, because really allows you to understand how the institution works and build relationships with people that you're going to rely on as your kind of responsibilities grow. So I thought that was super valuable. I've also participated in the EOL and some of the other kind of national programs. I would love to have more time to invest in that, but I haven't sought another degree. And I think that a lot of those courses did give me really good insight on kind of the business of plastic surgery, which I think is something that we could all benefit from, focusing on when we're training residents, because regardless of whether you're running your own small business or you're in an academic center, really kind of understanding how you fit into the economics of it is really important for advocating for your team and your patients.
Absolutely. I think, like you said, we all get additional training, sometimes on the job, but through opportunities through our national organizations. And now I know, Julia, you did more formal training because we've talked about this. And so I'd love if you could share a little bit about your master's and all of the educational training you've done.
Yeah, I did. I pursued a master's in health professions education, and I did that from about 2004 to 2008. So it took me a fair amount of time because I was an active surgeon at the time. And I did it with some outside prodding. In 2003, I was given the role of being the associate clerkship director for general surgery at the M3 level at Northwestern University. And part of the deal with that was was to pursue a master's. And this master's helped me in several ways. I mean, at the time, it provided, it was very hands-on, um, you had to do projects through all of the coursework. And I had this laboratory of 175 students in the M3 clerkship to do my, they were my subjects. And it helped make the education very real and very in time. And then when I finished it, it provided an area of gravitas that let me move up into a dean's office assignment for several years over at Northwestern. But my central thesis work was really on testing and composite scoring. And it's a pretty arcane little area, but in learning about how to build tests, then I learned how to teach people to study for tests. And it just provided some interesting insight. But I do not regret a moment of it, but I'll tell you, it was hard doing it. I had young kids at home at the time. And when I went in to do this, my husband's like, if you want to do a master's, that's great. But you've got to make sure that it doesn't cut into what is most important, which is our family. And so, it was some long time where I went to lay down with my kids at 9 o'clock at night when they were going to bed, and we would read for 20 minutes, and I would fall asleep with my kids and then get up at 4 in the morning to do the work. So, it's not something I would necessarily encourage everybody to go do, but it has paid off richly in the long run.
Thanks, Julia. I think doing it at the right time, however you define that, I think is a really critical point. And that really leads us into another topic that all of us struggle with, whether you're in academics or in private practice or working full-time or part-time. How are you able to balance your clinical schedule with your academic pursuits, but then also having a personal life and taking care of your family, as women are usually doing the majority of the work in the home, regardless of kind of two working parents, or taking care of your own parents or extended family members. So, Amanda, maybe I'll start with you and then go to Amber and Julia.
Thanks, Noopur. I think this is always the eternal question. I think there's definitely no such thing as balance. I like the concept of, integration, although that is also, I think, probably poorly describes the challenges that we face every day. I think for me, it is, every year is like a little bit of a different adventure. And, for me, especially this year, I have found that, I'm definitely rather overextended with my commitments. But once you're kind of on track and you're been trying to, achieve certain goals for a long time, it's challenging when they kind of come all at once. And so trying to figure out a way to manage them and not fail at them because you're overextended is very challenging. And then certainly managing your own kind of mental health and responsibilities of your family and the people that you take care of. I don't have like a great answer other than I really do try to prioritize the moments that I can. And I have realized that the more busy I become and the more responsibilities that I have, the more challenging, the more important it is for me to engage in those activities that really allow me to have that break and that mental health kind of release for me. I do really enjoy being outdoors, and I, ride horses. So even though I have less time, it's more important that I do those things just for my sanity, to be a better surgeon, a better leader and educator, and a better mother and better person for my family. Some of the strategies that I have adopted I have one daughter, she's 12. So going into middle school is pretty terrifying. As a parent, I feel like I definitely need like a different degree to be able to manage that stress of just watching it from afar, and how you manage social media and your 12-year-old. But I would say that, I've always tried to really block off any time that my daughter is not in school. And although a lot of it gets eaten up, I've really just tried to carve that up intentionally and kind of plan out my year around her schedule. I'm fortunate to have a very supportive family, but it definitely takes their toll. And when unexpected things come up, it's really hard to kind of manage those things. One of the things that I repeatedly hear myself telling my residents and students is that when you're a physician, you are always kind of, by the nature of the Hippocratic Oath, putting yourself after the needs of someone else. And, you don't always realize how much that is going to play out in terms of missing things that you don't want to miss, and these life milestones and things like that. But there are a lot of components of your professional life that, can be put on hold. And I think that as we look forward into the future, that one of the keys is really creating more flexibility in both our careers and our work environments, and in our training, so that we're not having to make these hard choices and just relying on that passion of, wanting to care for other people to make us feel like it was worth that sacrifice. So that's definitely something that I'm very committed to, is trying to kind of see how we can accommodate our more diverse demographic as we go into the future of medicine, and how we can accommodate people so they can, be more flexible. And I think, COVID really helped us a lot with that as well, being able to, at times be at home to take administrative meetings when that was never really on the table before, I think are one of the upsides of what was a very, bad situation. So trying to kind of pivot off of that flexibility so that we can have better integration and not stick to this kind of rigid structure that was historically the way that surgery has been run.
Thanks, Amanda. Julia, what about you? Because I definitely have seen you firsthand seem to manage it all with a smile on your face.
Well, there's a lot of hair pulling that goes on. There's a reason it's short and it's gray. Um, but I think I'm going to harken back to Amanda's first statement, which is she would plan it out a year at a time, and that's absolutely true. I would get the school My kids, just to put it in context, I have a 25-year-old who's been gainfully employed in her area of expertise, which is architectural rehabilitation and preservation, for the last year. And I have a 21-year-old who's entering her last year of college at NYU and is studying Middle Eastern history, culture, and Arabic language. So neither one of them chose to follow medicine. So I don't know what kind of an example we've really set, but I would look and plan the year in advance and the calendar, and block things off and realize a bunch of things needed to be planned far in advance. And if I was going to take this set of days, what could I do to rearrange things? And so I think being really good at logistical planning and not leaving things to just, random, oh, it'll work out. Um, it won't work out. So really plan things very, very carefully. I think one of the other things that I did is I I let my kids know what I could do. And so in high school volleyball, I'll come to your home games, but I can't go to the away games. But ultimately, I think that my parenting relationship is much better with my kids than it would have been if I weren't full time employed. I would have been the mother who, I mean, did everything and was at the school all the time and made sure everything was, perfect all the time. My kids actually really had to figure things out and had to do things on their own. I didn't have time to check their homework. I didn't have time to write their papers or do their projects. And, I think they're much better off for me having been not quite so able to solve all of their problems every day.
Having personally met your family, I'm just always impressed about how intelligent and independent your girls are, and how well adjusted they are with both two physician parents. So I think you've done a great job, Julia.
Thanks.
Amber, what about you? So you and I are sort of in a similar boat in that we don't have children, but are taking care of kind of like parents and extended family members. So our perspective is maybe a little bit different.
Yes, it is. And I definitely appreciate that there are so many different ways that people have responsibilities for their family. I try to be really flexible for my trainees also. I think because of these experiences that you and I both have, Noopur, knowing that there are a lot of ways that we're challenged that aren't just being a parent, although being a parent is a major way that a lot of our colleagues can experience stressors outside of work. I think a lot of really excellent points have been made by Amanda and Julia already. And I think one of the themes that I'm hearing is a lot of this logistic and planning and communication. And I think for me, that was a really important part of maintaining a healthy relationship with my husband and protecting time for my family and the large extended family that I have and the needs of caring for a parent. I usually tell trainees because at some point someone will be like, "Oh, how do you do it all?" And I'm like, "Well, there's no way that me as a high school student could have been dropped into the schedule that I have right now and succeeded at that. But, college was a little bit harder than high school, and medical school was a little bit harder than college, and, residency was a little bit harder than that. And each year of academic life seems to bring on additional challenges, as Amanda mentioned, where there is this kind of additional responsibilities and additional leadership roles pile up, you have more asks of your time. And so I think more tools have entered my armamentarium as my time management skills have been flexed more and more each year. Some of the things that have worked well for me in this logistical planning have been really communicating that clearly with the people in my life, kind of like Julia was saying, like you let people know what you can and can't do. And one of the simplest ways that I did that was I just have a little document with me on my, computer that's like, in November, I usually have these responsibilities, or I have to be planning for this meeting that always comes up. In January, I usually have these responsibilities, or I need to be preparing talks for this meeting that's the following month. And so I have this kind of longitudinal plan for myself. Like, I know what times of the year are going to be more stressful to me, and it makes it easier for me to say yes or no to things, because when I get those asks, I can kind of place them in the, like, how stressed out am I usually during that month, or how many other things am I usually committed to, because they're often being asked so far in advance that I, have in the past fallen into that trap of just saying yes, not realizing that it's like normally a terrible month for me. Um, and then just spending really, really scheduled time with my husband each week. There is like a scheduled, dedicated time where we sit down and have meals together. We look at the week, each week ahead, plan meals, know when I'm going to be home, know when we can sit and have time together, as ways of just kind of protecting that relationship. And then I organize all of my work travel into an app that he can see. And so he always knows. He was like, look, she's going to be gone to these meetings during this month. It's like he's not looking at my full clinical calendar with all my patient information. He's looking in a separate app and knows when I will be home and when I won't be home. And I think those are just been a couple of the tools that I've used to try and protect relationships and try and protect health in relationships, because that ultimately is the one thing that is more important to me than my work is my family.
Absolutely. I think all of you have made excellent points about the need to fill up your own cup and take care of yourself, but also still try to fulfill your responsibilities, and not just to your patients and to work, but also the personal commitments that you've made. I think one of the things that has been interesting about following all of your careers has been, someone looking in from the outside may think, oh, these are like effortless or obvious, but knowing each one of you personally, how much hard work and attention to detail and time you put into your careers, I think is something that I hope people realize. And to that end, I'd like each of you to talk about maybe a barrier to your career or maybe a detour, and how you navigated that, because it hasn't always been just easy and one thing leads to the next and success builds on success. So I think for all of us, there have sometimes been a struggle or two. Maybe Julia, I'll start with you and then work my way back.
Yeah. So I'm on my third job in plastic surgery. My first job was for the first 4.5 years. I was at the University of Cincinnati at that point in time. My husband was doing his fellowship and was working in a research lab for a couple of years. And then it came time for us to find a job where we both could have a career. And so then I started my second job, which was at Northwestern and Children's Memorial, which became Lurie Children's. And then there was a point in time where the cast of characters had changed at my second job, and it was time for me to realize that it wasn't a supportive environment for me any longer. And, you know, I would actually come home and sit on the couch and cry, and my husband would look at me and say, you've got other job offers. We can do this. Just take something new and do something new and try it. And what finally gave me that leap of faith to pick up and move was the challenge to establish this new residency. So I took it. And so I'd encourage people to think about, even though I've stayed in academics, that was the right choice all along. Sometimes the settings change, sometimes your needs change, and to just sort of, cry it out on the couch occasionally, but don't sit there crying it on the couch every night. Take a leap of faith and trust yourself and try something new.
I love that. That's great advice. Amber, what about you?
I have been in one job for my entire academic career, so I've not had the job switch excitement yet, maybe. But I think some of the barriers that I've experienced have been more related to aspects of burnout, but also feeling like what I was doing wasn't being recognized or appreciated by either department heads or the university on the whole, or just the enterprise itself. And I think one of the things that has been part of my evolution and just growth as a human being, maybe in that setting, is really starting to deeply recognize, but not in a bitter way, that no one is out to help you. No one is knowing what is happening in your life better than you. And figuring out how to advocate for myself and really sell the things that I was doing to people in leadership to get support for them. Because I think it's really tempting and really frustrating and really easy in situations where you don't feel recognized or appreciated to just become really upset about it. And ultimately, that doesn't help you get where you want to be. And so, a growth for myself has been starting to figure out, okay, like, I'm frustrated by this situation, but being frustrated about it doesn't help it get better. So how do I solve this situation? How do I proactively, sell something better to the people who are my superiors to get what I want to happen?
I think that's just really incredible advice, to know your own value and to use that to empower yourself, and do something about it. And to Julia's point, you can cry on the couch for a little bit, but you have to get up and go.
Yes.
Amanda, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I agree with a lot of what has been said. I think it is very challenging to be a female in academia, certainly in surgery. I think some of the reflecting on the many challenges, I think some of the ones that were really challenging to overcome were just really kind of like overt obstruction and sabotage. And when I think about some of those things that have happened, I totally understand why people would not want to stay in this environment, and sometimes think maybe there's something wrong with me for staying in this environment. But I think some of the biggest challenges were like when I started out in practice, and craniofacial is a very challenging, competitive specialty, but having people being told that I was a hand surgeon, or having other surgeons call my patients and tell them I'm not competent, or having, people in the community also kind of, tell patients that the community is not being well served because I didn't have the right training, and all of these little things that are very hard to overcome, makes me a little irritated when there's a lot of focus on, this imposter syndrome, because I think that a lot of the barriers that are most memorable and were most pivotal to me were things that were very intentional, very explicit, types of moves by, male colleagues. And I remember a time presenting a technique that I developed at a national meeting, and having people come to the microphone and accuse me of presenting other people's patients. And those are things that, like, if I tell that to a next generation, that how can I possibly recruit them into this pathway? It just makes me kind of sound like a crazy person. I think the approach to that has been multiple approaches. One has been trying, to address some of that over bullying directly by trying to educate people, and, having to demonstrate a level of confidence that, maybe I didn't always feel at that moment, especially when it was very early on. Other approaches were really, I kind of equate to the strategy of Russia in World War II, where I'm just going to sit here and wait it out, and continue to do the best that I possibly can. I don't think that's necessarily the best advice, although it is something that has been effective and obviously been in practice now for quite a long time. One of the things that inspires me most about academia and about the next generation, when I look down the pipeline and see a group of surgeons coming up the, residency track that is very different than what I experienced myself as a resident, is that this generation and the millennials they don't tolerate that type of injustice as well as I did in my generation, where our goal was to just keep our head down and try to get through and do your best job in, some type of meritocracy. But now I think that there are people who really are willing to, stand up for injustice and willing to use their voice. And I really see it as a great opportunity for those of us who've been able to endure that type of challenge and abuse and obstruction are now, able to kind of help pave the way for people who are not going to tolerate it. And I think that gives me a lot of hope about the future and us being able to advocate to be, excellent surgeons and providers and educators.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I think that's really a perfect segue into my last question for all of you, which is, what do you hope to leave as your legacy in academic plastic surgery? Amber, I'll start with you.
I love this question because this is actually one of the questions that I ask during the fellowship interviews. I always ask them to imagine an award named after them, and really the point is to get them to imagine what they want their legacy to be. And I love to think about those things. I think as my career has evolved, what I want my legacy to be has changed. But I think the things that matter most to me is really training my residents to take excellent care of patients, to really, really think about everything that patient needs to be well looked after, not just a surgical procedure, but also the social circumstances that they might be facing, the aftercare, to really think about them as a complete person, to get to know them as a complete person and to treat them as a complete person. And I think that's what I would really like to leave behind for my residents in my program.
Thanks, Amber. Julia, what about you? What do you think your legacy will be?
Oh, well, I think my immediate legacy and my swan song, project is to get a residency that's up and functioning and running, and then hand it off to somebody else so that they can, turn it into something, like amazing and wonderful. But I think ultimately the one-on-one education of students and residents, you don't know where that ever's going to go. And you don't know what you say to one student one day or one resident one day that will inspire them or make them a better physician. And so I don't know what the exact legacy is, but I'm going to echo Amber, is that I hope that I've taught people how to be a physician, not just a surgeon, and to be an empathetic one.
I certainly have seen that as an example in all of our interactions. So I think, and from working with your former residents and medical students, I think that's definitely true in action. And then Amanda, I know that I have benefited so much from you. And so I know what I think some of your legacy is for women in plastic surgery, for women in surgery in general, but I'd be interested to hear your perspective about what you're going to leave behind in academic plastics.
Well, thanks, Noopur. I don't know if I can really claim this as my legacy, but I think one of my great dreams, as I have been in the trenches training residents and see the incredible value of developing plastic surgeons that can really relate to their patient population, is I really hope that in some small part I can kind of contribute to creating a change in the demographic of our field that will really allow us to better represent our patients. And I do have this kind of, pipe dream that, plastic surgery will be the first female-led surgical specialty, and having that type of collaborative, shared decision-making at the helm of a surgical specialty, I think that it will have a tremendous impact on the whole house of surgery. And I hope that we can continue to encourage people to find that passion that will allow them to endure the challenges of academia and also reap the rewards.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And honestly, thanks to all of you, Amanda, Amber, Julia. This was really an incredible hour spent with you. And I'm hoping that our listeners will get the same enjoyment and pearls that I did. So thanks so much for talking to me about thriving and not just surviving in academic medicine. And you've all been excellent guests, and I've really appreciated the authenticity and your ability to be vulnerable and open with our listeners tonight. So thank you all so much.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Limitless Leaders podcast series, brought to you by ASPS, the Aesthetic Society, and the American Hernia Society, with the generous support of Allergan Aesthetics. We hope you enjoyed our conversation today and gained valuable insights and inspiration from our guests. Please check out other episodes of your favorite podcast platform. You can download them directly from ASPS EdNet. Stay tuned for new seasons, exciting new episodes where we will continue to celebrate and empower women leaders in plastic surgery and in general surgery. Thank you.